Not a lot of action in the transfer portal yet, but Kansas State's name continues to appear on offers across multiple people in the transfer portal. Let's talk about what we're hearing on this show. And are they making a focus towards guards? Let's talk about that right here on Locked On Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers, and it's going to be an interesting topic today. We're going to dig into the transfer portal, a little portal chatter, if you will, and that's exactly what this show is all about. We are going to dive into what we're hearing across the transfer portal with Kansas State, because I can only bookmark so much on social media until I finally can get a conversation with you guys. And it seems like there's just way too much to talk about, although nothing is concrete. That's how I feel about what we're hearing right now. Good things, because we're getting a lot of buzz from Kansas State. It sounds like they are being a lot more active in the portal than what they were last year. And what I mean by that is it only seemed like they were focused on a few players last year. And they did lose out on some of them, especially in the guard game, and wound up only picking the players that came to Kansas State. Now, we all know that that wasn't the end all, if you will, because the players that came in the transfer portal, although made up a lot of the production on the team for Kansas State this past season, still couldn't get them over the hump to the NCAA tournament. As of right now, all those players are returning. We haven't heard of anyone leaving in the transfer portal. And I wasn't going to believe anything we were going to hear on Tuesday anyways, because of it being April Fool's Day. I tried my hardest to stay off social media on Tuesday because, you know, it's just, you can't believe anything you read on that, especially with sports and all that good stuff. So we'll see what happens as we drop this episode today. I'm sure we might hear some news. I'm expecting it, actually, to hear that players are going to be leaving the transfer portal, and maybe we'll also hear some commitments coming down the line. But with that being said, it seems like there is a focus, and I don't know that means that they know something about maybe a certain player leaving, or they just know that the team at that position has to get better, or they want depth. I'm not sure. But it seems like there is a focus with Kansas State this year in the portal at the guard position. And looking at going through and siphoning through social media, shout out to On3, K-State Online, by the way. They put out a really good article kind of putting them all together, kind of matched in what I was researching as well. I think they had one I was missing. So shout out to them. Check out K-State Online, by the way. Those guys crush it. Both them and Go Power Cat are awesome. I think Go Power Cat just picked up some new writers, by the way, too. So shout out to them. But anyways, they put out this form, and what I was seeing as well on social media about all these players that have at least received some sort of offer or have been in contact with Kansas State during their transfer portal experience so far. And a lot of them that I'm tracking are in the guard game. And the first one that comes to mind is Miami guard Jalil Bethea. And I keep seeing him pop up on social media. There's this graphic that just popped up from 24/7 saying he's down to his final 4 teams. And some of those teams include, of course, Kansas State. Alabama is in there as well. And a lot of people think that that's where he's going to go, Alabama. But he possibly could find his way to Kansas State. Now, Bethea was just a freshman this past season, 6'5", 190 pounds, according to his ESPN profile. This past season, 7.1 points, 2.1 rebounds, 1.2 assists, and he averaged 19 minutes per game. So didn't get to see, you're only seeing just a little bit of him, but having some decent production while he was out on the court. 37% field goal shooter, 32%, almost 33% from the three-point line, 82% free throw shooter. So pretty good there, and participated in 31 games this season. This would be a player that you would get and have for multiple seasons. So if you were trying to build him up, I mean, this could be a guy that would be working with David Castillo as a potential backcourt, if you will. I don't think this rules out like leaving Doug McDaniel. Now, for the record, I put out a conversation a few days ago saying who I think is going to leave in the portal. If I had to put a guess, there are some rumblings about 3. And Bailey Fall is one, Ugano and Yesio is the other one, and of course, Buddy Rich is who the 3 that I'm thinking that are probably going to be putting their name in the portal. I don't have any inside information. That's just what I'm hearing through social media. And really, the Buddy Rich one is a gut feeling, just what we've heard and what we've seen this past year with whatever was going on between him and the team and Jerome Tang. Remember, Jerome Tang wouldn't answer it during a press conference. So it was something that he did not want to let out into the air. But Bethea could be an interesting piece. And I would really like to see a young player like that find a way over to Kansas State. We'll see if that happens. He was down to 4 teams last time we knew, former top 10 recruit and a McDonald's All-American. So really highly sought out player that went to Miami this past season. I must not have liked the minutes. Obviously, there was a coaching change in Miami as well. But down to Alabama, NC State, who also had a coaching change, but he's still down to them. Kansas State is the other team. And then Miami is still in the mix. So he might return back to Miami. Maybe he's trying to play from NIL money, but that's something to keep in mind. I think that there's a really big interest on this guards. And I don't know, again, if it has anything to do with them not being satisfied with David Castillo and Doug McDaniel. Now, there were some ups and downs from both those players, but David Castillo was the fact that he was a freshman. His shooting was an issue, but his defense is lights out. With Doug McDaniel, we didn't see him start until really Big 12 play. And there was some sort of rift between him and Jerome Tang at the beginning of the season. But towards the end of the year, it sounded like almost like they had a father and son connection, like that bond was unbreakable. So I'm not really sure what they're pointing at, or maybe they just want 3 solid guards on the roster to bolster this team to hopefully make that run into the NCAA tournament. I'm also seeing a Valparaiso guard from Valpo, all right. We talked about him before on the past, and I'm sure you've seen some comments about people saying how I love to pronounce these programs wrong, and that's okay. But Valpo guard, all right, and that is his name, all right, is also been received an offer from Kansas State, had some contact with him. We'll see if that works out as well. I mean, we'll see if that's like a backup plan. He's got some really good had some really good play as a freshman as well. It seems like they're trying to bring in players, at least in the guard position, from what we're seeing, that are not on their last year of eligibility, trying to build that core, if you will, that model where they can continue to build this culture and this buy-in. And maybe that has something to do with NIL. Maybe that has something to do with the fact that they don't want to just pay someone to show up for 1 year, kind of establish that new culture in Manhattan. But as of right now, what we're seeing for the guard play is that they're attacking what will be sophomores this next coming season. At Valpo, for the Beacons, all right, had 15.5 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists. He shot 40% from the field, almost 41%, and 38.3 from the three-point land in 34 games and with about 30 minutes per game. So stats a little bit better than what we're seeing from that Miami guard, Bethea, but at a lower level. It was at the mid-major level, so something to keep in mind there if you believe between the mid-major level and things like that. Speaking of Miami, I guess we should just say one more thing as well. Something fun popped up. Nigel Pack, former Kansas State Wildcat, entered the transfer portal. He's looking for his 6th year of eligibility because he's going to seek a medical waiver. He only played in, I believe, 9 games this past season because of an injury. And he was with Kansas State. Obviously, we know that. He helped Kansas State get to an Elite 8 while he was with Kansas State on that Elite 8 run, 17.4 points per game. He shot 43, almost 44% from the three-point line, 45% from the entire field. And wouldn't that be fun possibly to bring him back? That's some good defense as well. No, there's no rumblings of him returning. I just thought that would be pretty fun just to bring up. Now, if I do remember when he left the portal, obviously he was one of those first players that we heard the money portion pop up, and it was like $400,000 if I remember correctly. And that was a lot a couple years ago in the eyes of the transfer portal when it was just starting off. But one of the other reasons he said is you want to be closer to home. And I believe his home is in Indianapolis, if I remember correctly. So maybe he is more looking towards another ACC team or something like that. But it would be fun to maybe bring Pack back and have those Elite Eight vibes once again back in the building. Speaking of guards, and speaking of what Kansas State just did last year in the transfer portal, they spent money. One of the highest paid transfer portal classes in all of college basketball last year. If they're going to attack the guard game, does that mean they're going to have to spend money once again? It sounds like that's the case. Let's talk about that here next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. Get into the supplies that you need from the site made for skilled trades. That's Supply House. Whether you're in the plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to get the help you need and get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Well, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. And welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, and thank you for making this show your first listen of the day, proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball. Isaac Shade, Andy Patton have you covered right in the thick of it. Final Four coming up, and they will make you the most informed college basketball fan out there. So check out Locked On College Basketball today for your second listen, anywhere you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. We're digging into the transfer portal here, little portal chatter, if you will. Talking Kansas State men's basketball. Guard game seems to be the big deal going on. Talked about possibility of receiving Jalil Bethea from Miami. A couple suitors in the SEC. Obviously, can he go back to Miami? All right, the Valpo guard, will he be one that's worth bringing in? And then, of course, the big question in the room is how much money is Kansas State going to spend? Well, if they're attacking the guard game, they might have to bring that number up higher, depending on how far they go. But in the eyes of Coleman Hawkins being the top NIL paid player last year, well, that has already been surpassed. And the college basketball transfer portal deals are climbing up to not $2 million, what we saw from Coleman Hawkins in a financial package from the Kansas State Wildcats. But now we're starting to see $3 million packages going out to players who have entered the transfer portal and heading to a new program. And it is the guard game that's getting that money this year. It's not the big men that are receiving deals between $1.5 to $1.8 million, respectfully, according to On3. But they're seeing that New Mexico guard Devon Dent, who committed to UCLA just past Friday, signed a deal north of $300 million. He was perceived as one of the top guards in the transfer portal, but now that number has moved from what we thought was a lot with Coleman Hawkins as the top in the country, up another million and what seems to be north of 3 million, and it's the guard game. So Kansas State may be in a tough spot if they were trying to look towards a smaller NIL package. Maybe that's why they're going towards these freshman turned sophomore, trying to build a established core, maybe not going for the very top of the litter, if you will, focusing on possibly a smaller NIL package, but a commitment of starting and building a future. I'm not sure. I don't know what they are diving into, but it sounds like the guard position is what is absolutely bringing in the dough for players in the portal this season. A source said, if you can score, you're going to get paid. It seems like you're averaging 15 to 18 a night in the Power Four. You're going to get close to $1 million. Well, not the Power Four, but all right in the mid-majors was averaging 15.5 points per game. this past season as a freshman. So something to keep in mind on that one. A couple other guards that we're seeing in the eyes of what's going on between Kansas State and just receiving offers. Jonathan Powell, Big 12 player, West Virginia guard, has received some contact with Kansas State as well. And let me pull up his stats right here. A lot of tabs open, not trying to have a lot of tabs open to make sure everything goes good. But again, going back to the same type of player, was a freshman this past season, heading into his sophomore year from Dayton, Ohio, 6'6" guard. Interesting guard there. Averaged 8.5 points per game last season, 3.5 rebounds, and just under 1 assist per game. Now, played in 32 games, averaged 30 minutes per game, and only got 8.5 points in that one. Shot about 37%, almost 38% from the field, and is a 35% three-point shooter. Three throws were horrendous, 48% in the three throws. That's something that obviously we don't want to see because we were a really bad three-throw shooting team this past season. Now, I don't know how many three throws that was. Let's see if we can add that and just got to get the idea here. How many three throws did he shoot? So he was 12 for 25. So not a huge sample size. So he didn't go to the line a lot, but he did shoot 64, made 64 three-pointers this past season out of 182. So he was not afraid to put it up. Could be like a Brennan Hawson type player. Now, if that's the case, that would be great. He is also a pretty good defender, but what we're hearing is that he's also connected to multiple big Power 4 schools, especially in that area closer to West Virginia, closer to that Dayton, Ohio spot. Could be hard for him to make the movement to Kansas State. Ohio State's looking, Cincinnati's looking, Louisville, North Carolina, Ole Miss, Creighton, Pittsburgh, you name it. So if you can get him out of that area, out of that pipeline, could be a player to do so. And we're seeing two more guards being mentioned in this one, at least stateside. South Dakota guard Chase Forte. We talked about him in the past as well. We'll see if they continue to do that. And Taton Connerway, the Troy guard. He was the Sun Belt Player of the Year. Now Taton would be an interesting piece to add because he played very well for the Troy Trojans this past season. Troy, the Sun Belt had a really weird year. And this doesn't follow the model, by the way. He is a senior. He would be coming in as a final year of eligibility if they did bring him in. But his production may be unmatched. And you have to ask the question as well, after losing David Gasson, after losing Coleman Hawkins, you might lose Max Jones to a waiver. Who's going to be your top scorer this next season? Will it be Brennan Hawson? Will it be Doug McDaniel? And do you want to rely on one of those players to be your everyday scorer? If they lead the team in scoring, that's great. But wouldn't you want to bring in a player in the portal this year who could compete with those players to be the top scorer of the night? And to be honest, I would rather that be the case because you know what you have from Doug McDaniel. If he's on, he can easily give you 20, 25 points and 6-7 assists. That's great. He can be that facilitator and scorer if he's on. We did see some peaks and valleys this season, though, so this is probably why they're looking into the portal a little heavy in the guard position. With Brennan Hawson, excellent three-point shooter. Defense a little iffy, if you will. But when he's on, he can be give you 18 points because he makes 6 3-point shots. With Taton Connerway, with being the Sun Belt Player of the Year, averaged 14.2 points a game, 4 rebounds per game, 4.8 assists per game. This is kind of like your Coleman Hawkins build, but as a guard. Stuffs the stat sheet. Something that you would need to fill the void of losing a guy like Coleman Hawkins. So I like this one. We saw this team in the first round of the NCAA tournament. They played Kentucky. They did lose 76-57. In that game, we saw Connerway go 12 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists in 30 minutes of play. He had a really tough time with his 3-point shooting in this one. Now, he's not the greatest 3-point shooter, shooting only 33% from the field, but he's an overall good shooter. In his 32 games played this past season, 34, excuse me, he shot 47% from the field. I was looking at the wrong numbers, looking from last year. He's actually a 27% three-point shooter this past season. So his numbers went down from the three-point. But inside, everywhere else, from the field, 47%. Gotta like that. And that's the reason why he won Sunbelt Player of the Year. Let's dig into the final guard that they're looking at stateside. And it sounds like Jerome Tang is looking elsewhere as well, out in the international market. Let's do that to finish up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I first started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State. /hit. Do whatever you got to. Smash that subscribe button right now. Getting to 800 subscribers very soon, folks, and I appreciate you joining the journey. We're talking a little portal here, a little transfer portal talk as we await some actual portal news with Kansas State. Who's leaving? Who's going? Who's coming in? Who's going to help this team find their way back to the dance this next season? It's got to happen. We got to get this team back to the NCAA tournament. No postseason play if it's not the NCAA tournament. Like dancing or bust, right? And you got to add some portal pieces for that. Obviously, some good recruits coming in. We're going to see what happens and see how many of this team sticks around with the core. The fact that no one's left the portal yet is interesting to me. And I know we just hit April Fool's Day. No one's left. Maybe they're waiting this day. I'm interested to see what happens on Wednesday here. Happens today. If we get any news of people leaving the portal, because they're going to want to leave as soon as possible if they are leaving, because one day less of them in the portal is one day less of teams knowing that they're there and they're pushing out offers and getting commitments from someone else. Opportunities go away. So there is no incentive, with the exception of maybe a contract with their NIL deal here at Kansas State. If that's the case of why they haven't entered yet, there's no incentive for them to not enter now. So as of right now, I'm being very optimistic that the team that we have is sticking around for the most part. And it's exciting for what Jerome Tang is trying to build. I mentioned right before we hit the break of Chase Forte being the final guard from South Dakota. And we talked about him just a little bit before in the past, just kind of just fading by him. But for South Dakota Coyotes, again, that same type of model as Conroy. He's a senior, 6'4" guard, Raleigh, North Carolina, and a decent player. I mean, this is probably the biggest scorer of all the bunch that we talked about in the group. If you're going to get a player and you're looking for a dog with the scoring, if you're not looking for the facilitator, if you're looking for a guy who can just score the basketball, and when you look at the roster, the way it's constructed, I think that's the player you're looking for. So if you're trying to pick up somebody on just a one-year deal, this might be the guy for it. 17.9 points per game. That was good enough for 78th in the entire country. Almost 18 points per game. Out of South Dakota, remember, mid-major school, 4.4 rebounds per game, 3.2 assists per game, shot 47.1 from the field, and I'm not sure what his 3 points were. Was he good at the 3-point line? Not great. 32%, about average, right? So not anything really crazy there. 65% free throw shooter. Wherever he goes, this will be his fourth team. He's played with a couple other schools in just throughout the years. He started off with UNC Asheville, went to Northwestern State, and then the South Dakota. So he's trying to make that jump finally to looks like the Power 4 to finish off his career. Could be an interesting move for sure. Last but not least, let's wrap this up with what seems to be a new thing for Jerome Tang, but then again, not so much. We've seen it in the past with them adding international talent. It looks like they're trying to dip back into the well. And there's a couple touted European prospects that have come up by the names. You can shout out to our good buddy Joe Tillery. He's actually put out a video on this guy already, but his name continues to pop up, and that's Mathieu Grujicic. I hope I say his name right. It wouldn't be the last time or the first time I've pronounced somebody's name wrong on this show. But he's a European prospect who intends to play college basketball for the 25-26 season. He's a 6'5", 200-pound shooting guard and plays for the professional clubs out in the European clubs, FC Barcelona, their second team, and the under-19 team, and has made a name for himself on the international stage, according to 24/7. According to that site, also selected as an all-star at the 2025 Basketball Without Borders Global Camp, where he came across one of the standouts and showcased his unique blend of playmaking and scoring, also three-point shooting, and his defensive prowess. Oh, and then also his ability to impact the game on both sides of the floor. Sounds like an amazing prospect, right? Sounds very good prospect. If you go check out Joe's video, I recommend you do that as well. He does a great job breaking down his, also shows some highlight film as well. He's been sought after a lot, not just Kansas State. He intends to come back. This German national intends to play in the NCAA before pursuing what is likely to be an NBA career. As of right now, I don't think we have an NBA player on the roster. Coleman Hawkins was a fringe NBA player heading into last season, and the goal was for him to come to Manhattan to build up his draft stock. I don't know if that actually helped him or made it worse, and obviously the end-of-season injuries definitely didn't make it better. We'll see if Coleman Hawkins gets drafted or is at least invited to an NBA team for summer camp and gets his opportunity in the G League, like we've seen multiple Kansas State players do in the past. But adding a guy like Grujicic, who has an NBA aspirations and can do that, already getting international awards and international MVP awards over the last year or so, would be super exciting. We'll see if that happens. So this show turned into more of an entire show about the guards. So it sounds like we've got a lot more things to talk about with the transfer portal in the next coming days. If there's news to talk about, we'll talk about it. But if we continue to wait in this waiting game, we'll stop. We'll continue to start talking about more of these offers, break down some of these players, and so much more. But until then, thank you so much. Please hit that subscribe button. Join some comments below. Let me know, out of all these guards, which one do you like the most? And if I'm missing one, maybe there's a guard, because that is quite possible. The way that all these different offers have came in through social media, it's usually not like a one-stop place to find who gets the offers and whatnot. Almost kind of like that with Kansas State maybe sneaking under the radar a couple times, because you haven't heard a lot from it other than insiders putting out the sources, or maybe a player saying, this is the teams I've heard from. I kind of like that from Kansas State this year, because they were at the very top of people's minds once Coleman Hawkins signed that $2 million deal. A little different this year, might be a good sign for the culture changing. We'll see if that's the case. But let me know in the comments, out of all these guards, who would you want the most? And if there's a player that is in the transfer portal that we haven't talked about that you're like, man, he screams Wildcat, let me know there as well. We may be able to talk about him on the show. But until then, please like the video, please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.